So I'd like to introduce our first guest tonight. Adam Kohler will be joining us via Zoom tonight. Um, and what he's going to talk to us about is just this is so exciting to me that there's actually a competitor to the Cincinnati Enquirer. Adam is the founder of the Cincinnati Exchange, a growing local media platform that is geared to strengthen civic understanding. And he says through partnerships like Empower You, all of our classes are now on the Exchange. They're all listed for people to see. We're hoping Cincinnati residents will access educational content and engage with important issues. That's all Adam wanted me to say, I think. But what I really wanted to tell you was just how talented of a guy Adam is. He's from the West Side neighborhoods. He's a super successful entrepreneur. Working with his work is really a testament to his resilience and vision. He graduated from the School for Performing Arts. He ventured into marketing and co-founded a group called Dot Loop. I just bought a piece of property and everything I signed was in Dot Loop. And if you bought one, you probably have done it too. It's incredible. And that's a real estate platform which was later acquired by Zillow. So I wanted Adam to tell you all about the Exchange. And if you haven't got it or started to look at it for your news, I wanted you to learn about it firsthand. Adam, are you with us?
Yes. How you guys doing?
Welcome. Glad to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And thanks for everybody who showed up today. The weather's getting better, so I'm excited about that. We're going to get 85 degrees after we had snow like a week ago. So, welcome to Cincinnati. But yeah, I mean, I love Cincinnati. I'm from the West Side, like I said, grew up in Price Hill and Westwood. I've run for office a couple times. So for state rep in the downtown area, because my wife and we live in Mount Auburn, and also county commissioner. Two tough races, but GOP needs somebody to fill out a slate. So I have other things going on. If I lose, no big deal, which is everybody saw. I mean, it was a tough year in the mayoral with Corey Bowman. He got 20% of the vote, so you see the direction the city's going. And I don't know if you guys saw the Enquirer today, but there was a hit piece on his brother today that they had posted. And there's just no local conservative news. It's one thing that I discovered when I was running. I was like, who's got our back? Who's on our side? It always seemed like, City Beat, the Enquirer, some of these local papers will always seem to go after conservative candidates and, try to pick them apart somehow and help out the other side. And I talked to Russ Mock at the GOP, the Hamilton County GOP, and, he's moving on, and we're going to get a new chairman here soon. But he was like, you're right. And, I don't know what to do, and I'm like, well, let me start a website. So we're actually working on a platform called Content Credits, which is micro payments for paid content. So if you hit a paywall, your only option right now is to buy a subscription, or you can't read the content on any of these websites, Wall Street Journal, etc. So we came up with the concept of putting a little button on that paywall that if you click on it, you pay a quarter and you get past the paywall and you just read what you want instead of committing to another subscription. So we needed a website to demo that on, to show newspapers like, hey, here's what we've got. So we built the Cincinnati Exchange, which you can also get to if you just type in cincyx.com. It's a little shorter, CINCYX.com. And, the idea was just to use it as a demo. But, at the same time, Corey Bowman's campaign was happening. We featured him in an article just for the heck of it. And the paper started taking off. And the other day I was on 55 KRC. It's the second time I've talked on there about it. Tonight at 9:05, I'm going to be on again with Dan Carroll, if you guys want to catch that, just in a couple hours here. So the paper's picking up, and there's a real need for it. And the thing I discovered was you've got a lot of people in Northern Kentucky, Indiana, the suburbs of Cincinnati. They don't want to read the Enquirer anymore. And if you look at statistics, you've got about 3 to 5% of all journalists consider themselves conservative. Only 3 to 5%. And for whatever reason, creative writers just aren't conservative. And I went to the School for the Creative and Performing Arts. So I've been in creative careers my whole life, agency work, And even in those industries, we're few and far in between. So there's not too many of us. So I'm thinking, we need something else. And there's a market opportunity. This just isn't about politics. This is about readership. And I know so many people who've canceled their subscriptions to a lot of the other local news sources here and just don't want to read them anymore. And I don't blame them because those papers are not serving their interest. So, I talked to Dan and we talked about Empower You and we talked about our mission for the Cincinnati Exchange, and our vision's aligned. There's also a piece there with Turning Point that Empower You has. And I thought that was important to plug them into what we've got. So if you go to our homepage, you're going to see, and actually here, why don't I bring the site up here? If you go to our homepage, you're going to see there's a podcast section, and we have a lot. Can you guys see this?
Yeah, we can, Adam.
You can? Okay, great. So this is the website. And we just had another article post a couple hours ago here. We got some high school football stuff, which is so important to Cincinnati. And I've written a couple articles recently because we had that shooting downtown just blocks away from where I live here in Mount Auburn. And this woman was shot in the head the other day. A friend of mine who trusts me and knows that I have the paper now sent me the video footage. He has a network of cameras set up downtown. And he said, Adam, I want you to take the story. I want you to put the story out there because the other media, they're just not that interested. So he gave me the actual video footage, and I was able to go through that and document everything that happened. A group of teenagers, about 15 of them, were in Great Park. They made their way towards Vine and Liberty, and they grouped up and got even more people, and eventually they had 20 people, and they just started shooting indiscriminately at a car through other cars. About 50 shots. And you don't hear much about it, right? There's stories and things that are happening in our communities that you don't hear a whole lot about, but you should hear about. Another thing, I don't know if you guys saw this, but there was a letter sent out, and Gabe from Turning Point posted this on his Twitter today, and we turned around and wrote an article about it. But all of these sports franchises wrote a letter to Matt Huffman asking him to give them an exception so that their Chinese players and other players that have been barred from purchasing land in the United States, they want them to be able to buy land, which, that goes against what the Trump administration's working towards. And the state of Ohio has a bill right now that's working its way through legislation that's going to block it. It's the substitute House Bill 1. And that's going to bar some of these same individuals from some of these countries from purchasing land in the United States. And it's kind of hypocritical because you have you have this housing crisis we keep hearing about, but at the same time, you've got things like this trying to go through. So, there's just stories that we want to post that people should be aware of that, I don't think are going to get picked up by some of the other channels out here. And a lot of the people in the suburbs when I was running were saying, hey, Adam, I don't feel like I'm being served by the local media. And, I wish there was another paper out there. So we decided to put another paper out there. And this entire section here is getting kind of long because we have so many organizations and people that want to be a part of what we have going on here. So we're actually working to build up this separate media section for everybody whose podcasts are hosted on our website. So there's actually going to be an even bigger feature here soon for Empower You. But I encourage everybody to take a look at the website, go through it. If you guys want to write an article, the reason it's called The Exchange is because it's an exchange of ideas. If you know somebody who's a writer or has an important story in their neighborhood, we can't be everywhere. We got a small staff right now. So I'd love for you guys, anyone who's part of the Cincinnati region, if there's something going on in your neck of the woods that you think's important with the school board or local elections, or you want to write an article about the Bengals or the Reds, or who they're going to draft, send in the article. We'll take a look at it, and happy to have your voice heard.
Can you hear me now, Adam?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Are you taking opinion articles on the Exchange now?
We are. Yeah. Yep. We have actually several writers. We have a decent amount of people that have written articles for us or have signed up to write articles. If you go to our about page here, you'll see our founding team here, and then you'll see all of our writers. So Nicole, she's in Price Hill. She's a former Marine, and she's written a lot of articles on crime because, she's in Price Hill. Her and her husband had moved from Florida, and they were just so surprised at the lack of interest in doing anything about the crime problem from our city council members that she wanted to have her voice heard. So she's written several articles already here in the paper. And if you scroll down, you can see all of the articles that she's published over time here. And that's the same with anyone who's on our site here. Melissa, that's my wife right there. She posts a lot of travel articles. So if you guys are interested in getting away and going somewhere fun, she does a lot of research on travel, and she writes some really, really good stuff and has some really good places to go. But we have a really interesting, and you guys might know this guy, Todd Zinzer. Todd's a former U.S. Inspector General, and he is a watchdog.
Absolutely.
So he does a great job for the city. Josh, my personal trainer, writes health articles. Tom Brinkman's written something. Corey Bowman's on here. I don't know if you guys know Royalmont School out in Mason, but Josh is the president of the Royalmont School. It's a great faith-based school. And Marcel is currently running for office statewide. And we just got a lot of people. Fernando, he's a big developer out in the suburbs. He's done a lot, former Marine, big donor to the party. The list goes on. So Signal 99 writes for us. So we've got we got a good crew here, and it's always growing. So
anybody have a question for Adam? Right here.
I'm Todd, and I'd like to know, do you have any kind of forum where people can submit, who aren't able to write well, submit ideas for your people to look into and express it eloquently?
Oh yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. If anybody can email me anything that they want, but we're actually working on a page right now that simplifies submitting articles or article ideas. So it'll be kind of a contact page, and it'll ask you, are you submitting an article? Are you submitting an idea for an article? And you just write away and send it in, and we'll take a look at it and put it together. But sure. Yeah, 100%.
I think we need to give Adam a big round of applause for what he's doing for the community. Adam, keep it going. I'm going to be submitting my first opinion piece in a few days.
Yes.
So
well, that's going to be a good one.
We appreciate you joining us. Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's so great to have a different look than the Inquirer. So glad to have our board member, Tom Hagedorn, join us tonight to talk about socialism. Tom is a lifelong learner who's been researching Western socialism and progressivism over the last 5 years. He's spoken at Empower You on the same topic, ESG, introducing our new world government, American education, and its takeover by international socialism, climate calamity, excuse me. Tom is a member of the Empower You board. He also provides investment advice to individuals since 1983. He's been involved in various political, charitable, and community activities. He has a BS and an MBA from the University of Cincinnati and is a CPA and a CFP. Let's welcome, I know most of you know him, Tom Hagedorn. Thank you. Welcome, Tom.
Okay, I want to make sure. Can you hear me in the back row? Okay. You get clipped up here, and we'll fasten your seatbelts. There's a lot of material here. It's basically from 4 different talks that I've tried to sort of put together a Cliff's Notes on each one of them. And they do really tie in. It all ties in with socialism. That is the common thread here, especially with education. Not directly so much with the ESG and the climate change, but there is some commonality there. So anyway, we'll start with socialism in the USA. So a lot's happened in the 4 years since I gave that talk on socialism. And again, it's a short survey tonight of that, but hopefully we'll give you some good information. If you do want more information, there's an excellent author named Amity Slays. She's terrific. She's written 2 books, The Forgotten Man, which is about the Depression and FDR, and The Great Society, which is about the 60s and LBJ. And so with this segment of the talk, we're going to look through the twin lenses of the Communist Manifesto and the platform of the Socialist Party of America in 1912. And all right, so Ian's got to get us. All right, so the Communist Manifesto of 1848. All right, there we go. All right, so they had this platform with lots of stuff that they wanted in 1912, right? Look at all the things that happened in the next 8 years that were in that platform. 1913, the Federal Reserve System with control of money and banking. Same year, Department of Labor established. Same year, a graduate income tax. I hope you've all paid your taxes dutifully by now. 1913, 1916, the estate tax. 1920, workers' compensation. Now, a parenthetical note here. A lot of these programs we think make sense to help people, to give them a hand up when they're down, but they do come out of socialist ideas, and we like some of these, you know. Problem is, we also like the word free. And that is the problem with a lot of these programs. They're not paid for. And they've grown tremendously. Okay, so socialists, what they found was that they could not get elected. And so real quickly, they found this out. So many of them became progressive Democrats. Now, they were aided in their program with progressive Republicans, including even our beloved Teddy Roosevelt. Yes, he was, you can categorize him as a progressive. He was definitely eclectic, not right down the line progressive for sure. But at any rate, so those two joined together and got all those programs passed. Well, progressive Democrat policies led by the ones that are specifically Democrat, led by Woodrow Wilson, had become very unpopular by 1920, very unpopular because they didn't work. And so they lost power until the onset of the Great Depression and the election of FDR. So with FDR, not just progressive Democrats, but socialists and even communists got and used power within FDR's government. And that is documented. He did have communists in his administration. But they were discredited by the economic failure of many of FDR's New Deal policies and their admiration for Stalin, who was exposed as really a monster by the late 1930s, some of the things that he did. Things kept happening, though. Even though the socialists could not get elected under that label, they were successful in joining the Democratic Party and getting a lot of other things passed. So in 1935, we had unemployment benefits. Also the Social Security. Socialists wanted to fund it only with company money. They didn't want individuals to have to fund any of their Social Security. The minimum wage in 1938, Department of Health in 1953, Department of Education in 1980. All things that were in that 1912 platform. And so their program was well underway by 1980, but even when progress was slow, it was steady, sort of like a one-way ratchet wrench. So in the teens, it turned towards socialism, then it stopped. Then under FDR, it turned again, a ratchet wrench. I think, I'm not a tool guy, it only goes in one direction, right? So, it wasn't steady, it wasn't constant, but every time there was a change, it constantly moved more and more towards socialism. And as you will see later, education was a very important piece. So what was their end game? In 1912, what was their end game? This is chilling. Collective ownership of all transportation, communication, and large industries. Collective ownership of the banking and currency systems. Public ownership of mines, oil wells, forests, and dams, which of course are used or can be used for hydroelectric power. Collective ownership of land where practicable, all of which are, quote, but a preparation of the workers to seize the whole powers of government. Note that, seize, not get people like seize the whole powers of government, which is the workers' inheritance. So not everybody, the workers are going to seize this. It's their inheritance. Okay, so a lot's happened since 2011. So since 2011, remember the Occupy Wall Street protests? Now that was more classic socialism. That was capitalists against the capitalists on Wall Street, everything that happened in the housing crisis. That was classic socialism. It failed, right? It really did. It made a lot of noise. It really went nowhere. So they went back to their original plan, which I'll, at least for the last 100 years, which I'll tell you before, which I'll tell you a little bit later, which is to divide people by their fundamental characteristics, by their race, their gender, their identities, even their religious identities, to divide people. So in 2013, Black Lives Matter, or BLM, was formed to protest the acquittal of George Zimmerman and the death of Trayvon Martin. 2016, this shocked a lot of people, but it makes sense when you look at what they were doing. A Democratic socialist, Bernie Sanders, was definitely a key presidential candidate, a Democratic socialist. 2017, the Me Too movement started to protest institutionalized sexual exploitation of females. Who can be against that? I mean, that's great, but the socialists hijacked it and have used that movement to a certain extent for their own purposes, to divide. 2020, they did the same thing with COVID-19. It was used as for a pervasive increase in centralized power. Think about what was done back then, what government told us we could and couldn't do, where we could go and couldn't go, and the suppression of individual rights. Socialism is not about individual rights, right? It's about group rights. Groups of people have rights. Individuals do not. 2020 also brought the George Floyd death and the riots that ensued. That caused a huge surge in DEI all across government, businesses, you name it. So throughout this period, also beginning in the late 80s, socialists have used climate change to try to reach their goal, and that is centralized power. And, you'll see a little bit later how and you probably already might have a clue how they're using climate change to try to control and centralize power. Parallel movements have taken place in many, so this is focused on the United States, but similar things have been happening in other countries, just not the same because those countries' cultures are different. But there have been parallel movements that have taken place in many capitalist nations where they're doing the same type of attacks, just not particular to the United States. I'm so glad I brought a bottle of water. And activities of all these movements have had the effect of weakening national unity by emotionally pitting one group against another. Pardon me just a second. And that's the plan. It's not unity. It's division. So, all right. And Donald Trump, he's been a mixed blessing. I'm personally very glad he was elected compared to the alternatives, but he's been a mixed blessing. He has challenged and rolled back a lot of socialist initiatives, and that's been great. I've been cheering that on. Many of these actions are very welcome and encouraging. But we have to realize a lot of it was achieved by executive orders and aggressive actions. Trump doesn't just push the envelope, he tears it open, doesn't he? He's pretty aggressive. So some don't survive court challenges. They may not survive. Others may not survive future court challenges. And they certainly won't survive the next progressive. Just like Trump signed the orders, the next progressive that comes in can wipe them all away on dead, just like Trump did with Biden's, So I'm glad we have them in. I'm glad we've got these things for now, but it's tentative, isn't it? So Trump has done little to solve the existential problems of government spending, national debt, and soundness of the dollar. It's just not been a priority for him. And Trump also has the government investing directly in businesses, which is really not a capitalist. It's not really socialist, but it's not a purely capitalist thing for the government to be investing in businesses. This is where he takes a little piece of this. I'll let you in, but government gets so much of this business. Sorry, Dan. Should have. Thank you. Okay, so how'd this all happen? If you understand, and hopefully by the end of this, you'll understand how American education, and this sounds like a real bold claim, been taken over by international socialism. Now, I'm going to show you how, and I can document it. I'm going to document some of this in the talk right here. Gave this about 4.5 years ago, and it is kind of a provocative title. This really doesn't have a lot to do with this talk, but it has a little bit, but it's about the school. So I wrote that little book over there. And I brought a bunch of signed free copies. So if you'd like to take one with you to find out how were the public schools started in the first half of the 19th century, actually from 1783 through about 1865, end of the Civil War. And also, what did they look like? What were those first schools like? What did the founders think should be done in education? And there are some lessons there for today. If you read through there are some things you can look at and say, wow, maybe we should be doing something, not the same, but something like that. So anyway, there's some, and if you know a teacher, be great for a teacher that you might know, because I guarantee you, they were not taught that history in teachers' college. They were not. I know it because I know the books that were used, and they're really way off the mark. Okay. So that's a radical statement, right? So I invite you decide for yourself if the schools have a strong socialist flavor to them. So it took them about 50 years, from 1930 to 1980, to embed their philosophies into the American educational system. It was a very long project, but they were very committed to it. So if you think about this, I'm going to show you the effects of this, dramatic. So children that entered school in 1980 would be about 50 years old today. Let's say they're born in 75, so they'd be about 50 years old. And they were first exposed to these socialist concepts all the way through school, right? Socialist ideas have been steadily increasing in the schools from 1980 until now. So they got their original concepts in, but they've been packing more and more into the schools. And I'm talking mostly about the public schools, but it also has bled into the private schools, the parochial schools, maybe not to the extent, and certainly I'm not going to take a brush and paint everybody with the same can of paint, but yeah, it's not just the public schools. So anyway, Gallup and Pew surveys have been taking these surveys for years on, do you have a positive view of capitalism, and do you have a positive view on socialism? Okay, so here's how this breaks down by age, and this is a recent survey. Great, Dan, you're 2 steps ahead of me here. Whoops. There we go. All right, so here's the numbers. Baby boomers and older, we feel 24% of us have positive feelings about socialism. Okay, 63% of us have positive feelings about capitalism. About 3-to-1, almost 3-to-1. All right, but the younger you get, the more these numbers change. if you're 50 to 64, so that you just barely got a little bit of this socialist stuff, a little bit more positive towards socialism. We go from 24 to 27. Interestingly, capitalism jumps up to 69%. Guess things were good for that age group. I don't know. Now you get younger, though, 30 to 49. And I saw this in our neighborhood as our neighborhood changed over. The younger people are definitely further to the left. A jump from 27% to 30%. Now we're up over 1/3 of that 30 to 50 age group is positive about socialism. Now the youngest people who have been in this socialist stew in school, how many hours a day from kindergarten all the way up to college, maybe even grad school, maybe even this stuff is in the professional schools too. It's there too. So 55% of people in that age category have positive views about socialism. Interestingly, don't know how this works, 57%. So some have positive views of both. And maybe that means we'll take a little bit of socialism with a little bit of, I don't know how to explain that, but the socialism percent really scares me when we see all the instances where socialism has gone off the rails. If you've ever seen or read the Little Black Book is it the Little Black Book of Communism? Little Red Book? I don't know. Black Book, Little Black Book. Almost 100 million people dead because of socialism. So is it any wonder why a socialist, Bernie Sanders, was a credible candidate for president? Sanders praised Eugene Debs, who was the leader of the party whose platform you just learned about. So Debs was the head of that party that had all those objectives, so many of which have been met. Bernie Sanders in the 70s. Debs is long dead, but this guy was like a saint for Bernie Sanders. He loved him. Yeah. And any question how New York City can elect a socialist as a mayor? I don't think so. I mean, here it is, the schools. That's why. So how'd this happen? So we go back to that progressive era again, 1900 to 1920. And I'm actually going to skip down to the bottom. I should have flipped this on my slide. But so, and Dan, thanks for keeping ahead. Thank you. So in this era, progressive gained a lot of political power, both Democrats and Republicans. They called the shots. So they affected schools in many ways. Schools were dramatically changed. You had this new position called superintendent. Schools never had a superintendent. They had a school board in the local community. The school board got directly involved with the school, with the teachers. They knew what was going on. They were in the classrooms. Now you hire this professional, a superintendent. He takes over. He's in charge. It was also kind of a sexist thing because a lot of the teachers were female and the superintendents were all men. So the man came in, I'm going to tell you how to do this thing. But anyway, it left the elected school boards with almost no role. And honestly, that's the situation today. School boards aren't running these schools. They're not. The superintendent is running the schools. If you go to one of these meetings, first of all, I'd say take some no-dos, take something to keep you awake. But if you go to a school board meeting, you're going to see it's a very rote thing. It's very formulaic, and pretty much everything the superintendent proposes. And it's usually the chairman of the board runs it, but it's the school district. And you know who's the power behind the superintendent, or who he fears the most? The public school teachers union. He doesn't want trouble with the union. Why make his life tough? And they will, trust me. The union. This is not about the teachers. I'll bet 90% of the teachers they're just doing their job. They like teaching. They love it. They're not involved in this. But boy, there's a 10% that's in that union. They could be nasty. Seriously, they can be very nasty. They don't fight. We're too nice. We fight with Marcus of Quisenberry. Is that the official rules? They're fighting MMA. Yeah, seriously. So anyway, you brought in so the school boards are no control. Superintendents are running things. Unions were not in place yet, by the way, but they hire get more bureaucrats. We need managers and administrators in the schools. And each group was promoting their vision of education, not that of the founders. I think I better speed it up a little bit. I'm getting too wordy here because I have a lot of material. All right, so from the 20s to the 40s, here's where the Marxists come in, and truly Marxists. All right, so you look at any textbook on the history of education, and this is what our teachers and our administrators are taught about the history of their profession. John Dewey is the recognized father of modern American ed. Horace Mann was 19th century. 20th century is John Dewey, okay? I don't know if it's fair to say he was a socialist, but he certainly was very friendly with socialists. So he and a group of very influential American educators in the late 1920s decided that they wanted to go to Soviet Russia to study their education system because they just thought it sounded so great and such a great idea. So they actually went to Russia, 15 or 20 influential Americans in education. They met with Stalin. They got a personal meeting with Stalin. Came back and they learned some stuff from him, and that obviously was going to be part of they wrote positive things. They didn't write negative things about the Soviet system of education. So this it kind of played into something called Western Marxism. If you want to check this out sometime, go into Wikipedia. They have a really good article on Western Marxism. So one of the founders of that was a guy named Italian socialist named Antonio Gramsci. And basically, the idea was that the idea of dividing people with ownership, capitalist versus worker, wasn't working. It wasn't working. We got to try something else. And the something else was, we're going to now divide people by their basic identity, by race, gender, culture, all this stuff. That's how we're going to divide them in the future. Interestingly enough, Pete Buttigieg, is that right? His father was a lifelong professor. I don't know if it was political science, philosophy, or history, but anyway, his research was totally focused on Gramsci. So here's Pete Buttigieg, only child, sitting at the table, listening to his father come home from work, and I'm sure he's probably telling him about Antonio Gramsci, the great socialist that he spent his life doing research on. So Columbia University Teachers College, that was really, of the Ivies, that was the go-to Ivy for education. In other words, for training teachers, for coming up with curriculums, for coming up with pedagogy, like different ways to teach, Columbia was the go-to place. So that's where Dewey was, and that's where George Counts was. So these socialists, these people that had gone to visit Stalin, are right at the heartbeat of where the ideas come for American education. So they were there at Columbia Teachers College, and basically the way this works, they trained a lot. It turned out at a time when we didn't have a lot of PhDs or EDDs, doctorates in education, they were churning out a whole bunch of them, and they would get out and, hey, I got an applicant here. You're out in Missouri, University of Missouri. We got an applicant here from Columbia. Yeah, they're very highly respected. So they were able to get hired all over the country. And I want to emphasize, this was not a conspiracy. Nobody met a real, okay, how are we going to take over? It wasn't a conspiracy. It was more, Gramsci came up with the idea. They had shared ideas and shared beliefs, and they believed in this, and so, yeah, they were almost like sort of missionaries for socialism. We're going to go out and we're going to, bring this idea to America. Then there was a group of socialists from Frankfurt who they were very concerned. They were mostly Jewish. They were very concerned, fortunately for them, about Hitler. So they saw the handwriting on the wall. They left Frankfurt. They came to Columbia, and they were a part of sort of the think tank, important part. You'll see that if you read the article on Western Marxism. They call it the Frankfurt School. it was more like a school of thought. It wasn't an actual school. And so this is in the 1930s. This shows you how fast this spread. Ohio State University established a laboratory school. So they opened up a school. I don't know if it was K through 12 or whatever, but they opened up a school for kids, brought them in to try their more or less sort of experiment on the kids with this new model of education. Happened at Ohio State in the 1930s. You can look that up too. So I think Abraham Lincoln's quote is very prescient here. He said, the philosophy of the schoolroom in one generation is the philosophy of government in the next. It's true. We proved it. We have proved it. It works right here. Those surveys in the beginning proved it. All right. So now World War II comes along. World War II, and then we go right into the anti-communist era, late 40s, early 50s. Socialists, basically, they're kind of in the foxhole a little bit. You know, they don't want to have someone call them a communist when they're not. And some of them may have been communists. They may have been, but most of them probably were not. But they kind of laid low during that period. But then all of a sudden, the late 50s comes along, Russia puts up a satellite. And I remember when they did that, and it was like, oh my gosh, Russia has a satellite up there. And so we started a space race, and the federal government started pouring tons of money into state and local education for the first time. Science. They wanted to really spark science education, which mostly was a good thing, I think. But teachers and the unions especially saw a lot of money coming in, especially the unions. And this was what really helped the unions build their power, was all this money coming into the schools. And, if they could get the teachers in school districts to sign on with the union, that's union dues and money, money, money. So that's when the unions really started to grow. And the progressives continued to try to influence, and they were still working through Columbia with that whole plan. Now they've got people that have been in these colleges for these teacher training programs for 10, 20, 30 years, and they're turning out new ones all the time too. Early 60s, the Supreme Court removed prayer and Bible reading. I don't know how you look at that. I mean, you certainly want the schools not to be down the middle on things like that. However, it did take a good moral. There was there was a lot of moral teaching, that you wouldn't have to be a believer in any God to think that these are good principles, good character principles for people to be taught. And it kind of took a lot of that out of the schools when they took prayer and the Bible reading out, but that's somewhat controversial. But all right, so what happened? So the 60s through 2000. All right, the 60s, we had now all this money's coming in, huge growth of teachers' unions, huge expansion of federal involvement in the schools with LBJ. You could pretty much define this as, in the 60s, the progressives took control of the city schools. By the 70s, they had control. And by control, again, it's subtle. You have to look at, there's not a teacher standing up there saying, we should be a socialist country. It's not explicit at all. In fact, the teacher might not even like it. The teacher might be very conservative, but it's subtly embedded in the curriculum. 50 years ago, and I've heard this, I've never actually looked at textbooks to prove it out, but apparently and I'm not sure what classes, I guess this would be in maybe social studies, but family, father, mother, any terms that describe traditional families are not in the textbooks because it's felt that this would be offensive to families that aren't. So there's no ideals that you can see where, social science proves the nuclear family does produce, on average, a much better outcome for society than a single parent. God bless the single parent, but that's a very difficult thing to do. anyway, I'm getting off my script on that for sure. So anyway, they had took over the suburban schools by the 70s, the rural schools, even the Batavias and, Dark County School and schools down in Kentucky and Mississippi and out in Kansas. They'd also got their influence into the rural schools by the 1980s. And of course, 1980, they created the Department of Education. So, that Dewey Count's vision, education for a socialist future, was definitely in place. And we saw that in the surveys that I showed you before. So, all right, now I did my last talk in 2021 or 2022. So I'll run through these real quick. So the Republicans joined forces with the Democrats because, like I say, the teachers' unions are very powerful. They have a lot of money. They give a lot of money. You don't want to be on their bad side, or they'll find a candidate and run them against you. So George Bush and Teddy Kennedy teamed up for No Child Left Behind in 2001. 2010. Now this was a hoot. So Bill and was it Melinda Gates? Bill Gates and his wife, they had a huge initiative. They spent a huge amount of money on a curriculum for the whole country. It's called Common Core. So they got it up to Washington. They got a bill passed in Washington to provide a huge amount of money for a national curriculum. So no longer would Ohio Department of Education think, what's a good curriculum for Ohio? Or no longer could, let's see, we're in Princeton. I think we're in Princeton. No longer could Princeton School District adjust that a little bit and come up with their own curriculum designed for their community. No, now we're going to have this national curriculum. But you didn't have to do it. No, you didn't have to do it. But what happened was they created this huge pile of money, and this is a law. They said, if you accept the state of Ohio, if you accept the Common Core curriculum, you're going to get this big pile of money. If you don't, you're not going to get it. Well, guess what? They wanted the money. So a lot of even the blue states went right along. I totally understand that. Maybe even the purple states. A lot of red states went along too, including Ohio. So Ohio is under the Common Core, a national curriculum that was designed and sponsored by the progressive Bill Gates and his wife, Ohio. Yeah, pretty amazing. There was a big push for this whole race, gender, sexual orientation, later transgender, economic status, even religion, different ways to divide people. One, I'll get to this again in a second, so I don't want to repeat myself, but it was a plan to kind of divide us and sort of destroy destroy the melting pot. They don't like the idea of the melting pot. They like the division, different groups. So in Ohio, our Board of Education, which is pretty much controlled by the Republicans, since the Republican governor appoints most of the members, they approved a plan in 2018, a 5-year plan. And the 5-year plan said that their number one goal of our education was equal outcomes for all students. Equal outcomes for all students. So I know there's been grade inflation. I guess it's like Lake Wobegon. Everybody's above average. I don't know. But yeah, it's ludicrous. But it kind of has a socialist tinge to it, doesn't it? No matter how hard, no matter what. Look, different students have different abilities in different things. It doesn't make one thing good or bad. It just, that's the way it is. But if it's an intellectual thing, if it's an academic thing, some students are just better at those things. And then some work harder than others, right? Some work harder than others. But no, we're going to get to equal outcomes somehow. That was Ohio State Board of Education, 1918. And Dan remembers this very well. In 2020, the Ohio State Board of Education passed Resolution 20, which mandated critical race theory for every school district in Ohio. Dan, I think, was the one that found out about it. We started an initiative within Empower U and worked really hard for about 6 months, 7 months, really, really hard. We did, I think, get some people to listen, but it was extremely frustrating. The Republicans run the state government, right? You had people that wouldn't listen, wouldn't meet, or you'd have people that would nod and smile and do nothing. It was to me, it was very discouraging. I don't know how your conclusion. Very discouraging. Yeah, to see that. Okay, so what's happened since 2021? Well, in K through 12 in Ohio, not much, and that's mostly because of the state teachers union. It's very powerful, a lot of money, and they can get a lot of boots on the ground for political campaigns. They're very progressive, and they're very much feared by Republican policyholders. And in fact, a lot of Republican elected officials, like state reps and state senators, they take a lot of money from the OEA. They get contributions from the liberal. So their responses, maybe that's why we didn't get real far, Dan. I don't know. But so nothing much on K-12. Really good news. In higher education in Ohio, the news is much, much better. In February 2025, they passed Ohio Senate Bill 1. It aims to promote intellectual diversity among the students and faculty and to end indoctrination. It outlaws DEI discrimination in hiring, admission, and scholarships, and it also requires much tighter supervision of faculty with tenure. So, there's faculty that get tenure and they keep on working just as hard, maybe even harder, but there's also faculty, because you can't be fired pretty much, that at some point in their career, they start toasting. I've been taught by some of those. You can tell they're near the end of their career and they know it and the students know it, they're just biding their time. So really good news that we got that passed in Ohio. Federal Department of Education, also a lot of really good things are happening there. The problem with the Federal Department of Education is a lot of this is executive orders again, and it's decisions by the head of the Department of Education. So you change administrations and all the good stuff goes away. But at least for 1 year, we've had a lot of good stuff. And for 3 more years, it's very good. But bear in mind, socialists have been at this for 100 years. They're very determined, very patient. Many of them are laying low right now, whereas before they were real outspoken about this stuff. Now they're doing the same policies. They're just trying to do it quietly if they can. They're just waiting for them to get back in political power. They'll turn the switch right back on. Yeah, when they can. So, all right. So what's the only solution? This is radical. I'm telling you, though, a lot of people should be taking their kids out of the public schools. I've fought them in Forest Hills. You can't win. They've got too much power. The teachers unions, and they're nasty too. They're really nasty. You can't beat them. I would just encourage anybody, just look at when the kid, even when they're in kindergarten, first grade, check out the school, find out what is the curriculum, what are they teaching there? A lot of people during COVID, when they did the remote learning, they were shocked what they saw, and they took their kids out. You're teaching my kids that. So I would just urge anybody, their kids or grandkids, if you have influence over your children, to just be vigilant. Know what your kids are being taught. And, you can counter that at home to a certain extent. But if you're spending all your time countering what they're learning at school, maybe they need to be at a different school. Yeah. Okay, ESG. I know I'm running too far over, so I'm going to have to speed up here. So looking behind the curtain. So we have sort of a Wizard of Oz theme on this. Introducing our new world government, quotes. So great news. That's the update. The plan is not working too well. ESG is sort of falling apart a little bit at this point. And there's kind of the Wizard of Oz theme. There are some masters of the universe that are trying to to push all the buttons to run the whole world, and that's the wizard in there. And all of a sudden, Dorothy and her friends just pull the curtain back. Who's pushing all those buttons? So who is the wizard? Who is he or she collaborating with? Well, the wizards are the elite in business, academia, media, and NGOs. They're educated in elite schools, and I'm talking like the Ivies and a very narrow group of schools, and a few others too. And they socialize with each other. They don't, they pretty much are in a bubble, social connections, they always mean a lot, right? Who can help you get a job for sure. But so they're often sponsored and advanced into positions of power. If you've seen the Davos once a year, they show Davos. Well, there's a meme, you can look it up on Wikipedia, called Davos Man. So these people are Davos man and woman, okay? There's also kind of a funny thing we know about blue collar and white collar. These are gold collar workers. They're gold collar workers. Kind of cool analogy. Again, this is not a conspiracy. It's not a conspiracy. It's just a collaboration of like-minded people. And there was a great book by Charles Hughes. I'm getting the name wrong, but Charles Murray. He wrote a great book called Coming Apart. And it was a sociological study of how wealthy, more educated people were integrated a lot with middle class and lower class people in the 50s and 60s. There was a lot more mixing. And gradually there has been this growing apart. And now these wizards are really concentrated in a surprisingly small number of zip codes. You wouldn't believe, you can imagine the cities, but it's pretty unbelievable how wealth, higher education is concentrated in very small just a few zip codes all over the country. And so what are their core beliefs? Well, ESG, so that's environmental, social, and governance for starters. They believe the world faces disaster caused by global warming. Systemic racism is still a serious problem. And I mean systemic, not just, of course, racism exists. Of course, sexism exists. Is it systemic, though? Is it extremely widespread? Is it causing huge discrimination against folks? That's systemic. So they believe, since they're so smart, they have so much money. I mean, hey, I'm so talking like what? I'm so successful. I've been right in all this other stuff. I got to be right in this. I've got the answers. I'm going to solve the world. We and our friends are going to solve the world's problems. And they do believe masses of people, nations, states, and democracy are not capable of solving these. Note, I say democracy. They're not capable of solving these and many other problems. Because I guess they think there's too many stupid people that vote. I don't know. Anyway, only wizards using central planning enforced by global organizations can create their utopian, heaven on earth worldview. And really, this is not socialism, but it's a lot more compatible with socialism than with capitalism, because they want control, they want centralized control. So what organizations? There's literally 20 organizations that span the globe, mostly in the industrialized nations, that are dedicated towards basically running the world. You could call them transnational, above and beyond nations. They want power. They're actually able to apply power beyond the nation that they might come from. The UN and the World Economic Forum, which is the WEF, are the most important. WEF sponsors that Davos conference that you may have seen. Most of the 20 organizations have relationships with the UN and the WEF. And their members span the entire industrialized first world. What are the organizations? Too many to name. I was going to bring a list, but I thought, well, I wasn't going to read it on the radio because I don't want to get sued. But, and I haven't updated the list to know if it's accurate now. But if you look at the companies that have signed on to this and the organizations, there's a lot of them from a lot of our big names in Cincinnati have signed on. Yeah, all over the country, all over the world. And they voluntarily do this. They agree to do different things relative to DEI, relative to climate change. They voluntarily commit contractually to do this. They don't have to. I guess they agree with, and it's also a peer pressure thing. You know, gee, all the other companies in our industry are doing this. So maybe we should do it too. So membership is voluntary, but peer pressure is huge. So the CEOs actually sign written commitments on behalf of their firms. Thanks for keeping up with me, Dan. You got a good sense of timing there. Okay, so oops, what happened on their way to running the world? Donald Trump is what happened, or who happened. He has come down really hard on ESG. And in this country, he's got U.S. civil rights laws on his side. You cannot discriminate against anyone based on race or gender or religion, anyone, and not just certain categories. No, you can't do it. And so he's got U.S. civil rights laws on his side. And the World Economic Forum, WEF founder, has had serious personal failings that forced him out. So the WEF is really kind of in shambles right now. And U.S. corporations especially are backtracking big time away from all this stuff. You know, really hard, running away from DEI, ESG. They've done a complete reversal. I mean, they're worried about civil liability. They're worried they can be sued. You know, if you have a pattern of not hiring a certain race or a certain gender for 2, 3, 4 years, you know, it begs the question, why all of a sudden? Why did you change all of a sudden? So that's just one area, but they're also backtracking big time on climate change. Okay, on to climate. All right, I'll do that. This is actually right now probably my favorite subject. I've been really doing a lot of deep dives on it, but too bad I don't have more time. So let's just jump right to, and this is also good news. You know, the socialism education, that's going to be a long haul to turn that around. Long haul. But ESG, things are looking a lot better. And I think most people are against it. Even classes that were benefited from it don't like. There's almost a bad tinge about it. You know, did you get your job because you were the best, or did you get your job because you fit in a certain category that we were looking? No, that would be a horrible thing to face, wouldn't it? If you worked really hard and you just had this, even the idea, gee, people might not really recognize, you know, how good I am, you know? So you don't want any question about people's abilities. And when they're doing very important things like flying airplanes and doing surgery, I want the best, you know? I don't care. It's like that crazy LA mayor, when they had that terrible fire, she said, we want firemen that look like people, that we want people to see firemen that look like them when they show up. I don't care what they look like. Put out the damn fire. Yeah, crazy ideas. Okay. But anyway, we're turning the corner on climate change big time as well. I'll skip through these headlines. In the 1970s, they were worried about the coming ice age and we were all going to freeze. That changed in the late 80s. And so by the 90s and now, you know, hardly a day goes by when we're all going to boil. You know, it's getting too hot. All right. So here's the claims. The claims are that the earth is heating up, right? But they've switched from global, if you notice the messaging, they used to talk about global warming. Now it's climate change. Subtle but important change. If the temperature goes up 1 degree in 20 years, I'm not going to worry too much about that. maybe 200 years from now, it is going to be real hot. I doubt it, but if you tell me we're going to have more hurricanes, we're going to have more tornadoes, we're going to have more really cold weather and snows, and now I can scare somebody with that. So that's the messaging has changed from global warming to climate change. So they blame it all on CO2, and that mostly from burning fossil fuels, coal, oil, and natural gas. And they say that it began in the 19th century with the spread of industrialization. When we really started, we were burning coal before, but then when we discovered a lot of oil, started burning oil and gas, that was a whole different deal. And so the plan, okay, fossil fuels must be greatly reduced by 2030. Nobody, not even the most radical environmentalist, thinks that's going to happen. That's 4 years. No. We're not going to drastically reduce fossil fuels by then. And they must be totally stopped on a net basis by 2050. That's not going to happen either. Unless we may get a breakthrough. If we get breakthroughs in science and engineering, maybe. People have come up with some amazing discoveries, but until that happens, it's not science, it's science fiction that we could do away with fossil fuels. It's just not possible. Unless you want to go back to the 1750s, raise a whole bunch of horses and start riding horses and having them do our farming. Might be kind of fun. All right, so some quick facts. The Earth is warming over the last 150 years, about 2 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's 0.14 degree Fahrenheit per decade. Very, very slowly. Now, the Earth is a very old place. It's about 4 billion, 4.5, somewhere in that range. Very old place. And geologists have ways of dating things. So we are currently in a 10,000 year period of warming. It's called an interglacial. The general, over the last 200-300 years, it's been mostly a glacier, a colder Earth than normal. More ice and so forth at the poles. Glaciers coming down into like even North America, into the United States. But we're in a 10,000 year interglacial warming period. It's almost over. I mean, timing wise, if it goes like it has for 200,000 years, we're going to enter into maybe in 100, 200, 300 years, maybe tomorrow, we're going to start entering into a cooling period. And the Earth's been much warmer. 1,000 and 2,500 years ago, the Earth was much warmer than it is today, when CO2 was far lower, when we weren't burning oil and gas. Might have been, we weren't burning fossil fuels then, and CO2 was a lot higher. So a lot of their theories really break down when you look at some of the history over time. We had something called the medieval warming period from 950 to 1250. And this was where the Vikings terrified everybody, sailing all around Europe and raiding everybody. Well, they could do that because there were ice-free seas up in Scandinavia. And they colonized Greenland. They called it Greenland because it was green, Iceland, and possibly North America. And temperatures fell actually from 1940 to 1980. They actually fell despite CO2 has had a gradual increase since about 1850. Yet we had 40 years of cooling. What caused that? So we know there's other factors. CO2 definitely does cause warming. It does. But there's a lot of other factors that also could cause cooling. I'm going to skip over the CO2 facts. I guess my best thing that I could say about that is that we cannot have the type of warming that they're scaring us with just with CO2. The chemistry and the physics just doesn't allow for that. It doesn't allow for that. So there have to be other factors. Well, the global warming alarmists, what they do is they have some science that they can point to, but it's theoretical. It's not proven that, well, if the CO2 gets up, then that's going to cause this, that's going to cause that, that's going to cause that. In other words, there's going to be a cascade of other factors that will add on to the that will also be warming. What they normally fail to do or discount, there's also theories of things that could cascade that would cause cooling also. And they kind of like cloud formation. You would get more cloud formation, which depending on where the clouds are in the atmosphere, that could cause cooling. So the greening of the world, if you look at a satellite photo from 1980 and a satellite photo for today, the differences are stark. The globe is much greener today than it was in 1980. CO2 is plant food, right? We would die without oxygen. Plants die without CO2. Okay, so feed them more CO2, they're going to grow more. They're going to have more leaf area, more branches, more flowers, more fruit. There's going to be more plants. And interesting thing is also CO2 tends to make plants more drought resistant. There's something with the, I think it's called the stomata on the underneath part of the leaf. And so that tightens up or something. It allows them to conserve water, more CO2. So yeah, don't worry about the plants. They're going to be just fine. All right. So the policy can be very damaging. I probably don't need to tell you that because there is a direct relationship between growing economies and a lot of good things. The more income, savings, investment, and wealth you have, the better generally, the better nutrition, more medical treatment, relief from back-breaking physical tasks like farming. You get on a tractor now instead of walking behind a horse. Longevity's increased tremendously since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. More time for education and research. That people have more time to have fun things, but also to educate people, to have research. And so the real tragedy is that we've been telling the organizations that are behind this have been telling emerging nations, they've been kind of bribing emerging nations not to try to improve their power grids, not to use fossil fuels, and they give them money for that. So they're keeping these emerging nations, trying to. I think the emerging nations know what the game is. So I think they're taking the money and still doing what they want to do. But yeah, it's a bad thing. Who's pushing this? The socialists. All the people have been educated in school since 1980 about, they give lessons in kindergarten about the climate, and it's usually not down the middle balanced. Billionaire oligarchs are pushing for it. Politicians have found a way to scare people and get elected. And as a footnote there, Al Gore's net worth was about $1 million in the year 2000. And when I wrote this 4 years ago, it was about 330 million. So 1 million, 330 million. That's pretty good. This is after he got out of office and started, flying around the world in his jet, consuming a lot of carbon. I'm sure he paid for carbon credits to offset it with all the money he made. He certainly would have the money to do that. Okay, so what's being done about it? A lot. And I'm just going to say that Trump has selected some really good people at the Department of Education, Environment, and Interior, and really just doing great. So I went far too long, but any questions? And I'll hang around to answer any questions. And don't forget those free books over there. If you don't have one, take one.
Here's a question, Ray.
Yeah.
Yes. Socialism is the subject tonight, but I feel it kind of fits in with the idea that most of our modern freedoms, in my opinion, stem from the development of a middle class. And that even in these socialist ideals, there's always an elite group that's running the show.
Right.
And so if you can make it more and more difficult through regulations for people to become financially independent, middle class, and drive them down into a dependency class, you have fewer people who can stand up to what the government wants to do,
Right.
whether it's not your best wishes.
Yes.
And so it kind of helps pave the way for the elites
Yes.
to have their way without pushback from somebody who can say no.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's an excellent, a healthy middle class is a very good defense against socialism. Yeah.
Here's the question right
Yeah.
here.
Back to when you're talking about the teachers' unions and stuff like that. When you said they were very powerful, what kinds of things do they do if they're not happy for retribution?
Okay. So what they can do is they can pull the money away. So a politician is counting on that money for his reelection. They can pull that money away. They can go out and recruit a candidate to run against that individual, especially in a primary. Politicians hate that because then they have two elections. They have to win the primary and they have to win the general election. So they hate that. And they've got plenty of money to buy ads. They got plenty of money to buy ads on the radio and TV and now internet ads, social media ads against that candidate. So they don't want to, even Republicans, they don't want to cross them if they can help it. I'm not saying they always vote their way, but they think about it before they vote on something for sure.
My question is, along with the unions, is with the school choice program,
Yes.
with the teachers' unions in the public schools, are they going to branch out to these private schools possibly for board membership?
I don't think so. I haven't really thought about it. They haven't so far. I'm not sure. I think they might be harder to organize, but I'll always say I don't know when I don't know, and I don't know.
Has there ever been a school district that stood up to the federal government and said, we're doing things our way, we don't want your money?
Well, colleges have. Hillsdale College. Now, this is I'm glad you asked that because Hillsdale College for a very long time has refused any federal money because they don't want the handcuffs that are attached to it. Hillsdale College has sponsored an initiative all over the country called the Barney Initiative. Probably some wealthy person named Barney gave them some money. And so they help sponsor public choice schools, public charter schools. So Cincinnati Classical Academy, which is right up on Reed Hartman in Blue Ash. I've been involved since the beginning up there just as a supporter, and it's an awesome education. Those kids are getting great. It's a public charter school. The kids don't pay any tuition. Now, the school does have to, they do get the state money per child. They do not get the local tax district money. So they have to raise about half of their budget. But the students don't have to pay a dime. It's an absolutely superior education. They do the testing that the public schools do, and they every year they're up there with the Wyomings and the Indian Hills and the Madeiras of this county down here. They're right. Their kids are right there. Yeah. Without I will say this. Without there is no political indoctrination. None. It's just, but it is a classical approach, which is different, but I think it's really a superior education. Those kids learn how to think. They learn they learn not what to think, how to think.
Questions? Anybody?
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Two online questions.
Go ahead.
Someone asks, with all of this awesome information in mind, what might you prescribe as actionable by members of tonight's audience? In other words, what kinds of things can we do?
Ooh, ow. Okay. Well, gee, I talked about so here's something. So, find a problem that you're passionate about. Was there something tonight that really struck you in a certain way? Maybe a personal way. And find something you're passionate about. And then you'll have to do the research to find out who is fighting this. And take your time. Don't just jump right in and join the first thing out there, but find out who is fighting this. What can I do? And remember, you're only one person. Don't expect to change the world tomorrow. But we've got too many people that are sitting home looking at, I mean, I do it too, but too many people sitting home watching the news and, throwing their shoe at the screen. Get up and do something. Just little things.
Next question, Michael.
Make a difference.
The next question is kind of related to that. It says, have conservatives been sitting too passively on the sidelines just watching during all this transition?
Yes. I think this is generally true. Conservatives tend to have, more conservatives tend to be married. More conservatives tend to have kids. They tend to have larger families. Those activities consume more of their time. I think that's a broad brush. It is pretty true. I think that is a pretty true statement. So they get involved there, and that's great. But there comes a time in your life when you don't have to spend as much time with your kids. You're not, and there's many years ahead of you where you can be a positive.
Or when your kids don't want to spend as much time with you.
Yeah, like at 13.
Exactly. We've got time for one more question. Anybody have one right here? Our winner tonight.
Not so much a question as a comment. So many people say, the global warming and the global cooling and how our temperatures are changing so drastically. I have a picture at home of my father on Christmas Day, 1963, in a pair of shorts and a tank top, washing his car. It was in the high 70s that day.
Global warming.
Thank you, Diane. Let's thank Tom for a great job. Thank you, Tom. I really like the way you tied together those four subjects for us. So, when Tom was talking, it made me think about a subject just to show you how things have changed over a period of time. I'm going to be doing a class on George Washington on June 2nd, and when I was doing my research, for 130 years in public schools after 1755, it was taught in every single textbook that Washington, by divine intervention, had survived a series of shootings when he was out during the Revolutionary War. So for 130 years, kids learned this. But in 1980, about the time when you started talking about this transition, what the schools did was they changed all the textbooks to, instead saying it was divine intervention, what the textbooks said was that Washington believed that it was divine intervention that had saved him. Just what Tom was talking about, a gradual little change. But if you think about all those gradual little changes, the impact that they can make, it's really astounding. Thanks for all your work. Let's give Tom another round of applause. So wow, we're going to go from heavy socialism talk to Bach. That's quite a transition point. We'll be having Michael do that on Tuesday night. And let's give him a round of applause, our executive producer, Michael Mercier. And then a week from tonight, Dan Hurley, I'm sure, will give Empower You Loves a Great History Talk. He's going to give a really good one next Thursday night. So thank you for joining us, and go out and do great things tonight and empower you. Thank you, everyone.